Hello, welcome back. I'm Lisi Barella, VP of SMB Sales, and I'm excited to welcome you to the Mom Project's Blaze Your Own Path workshop series. We tailored these sessions to the topics our team has heard you share interest in to ensure you hear rich and beneficial insights to advance your business. The sessions we cover are all grounded in research published by the Mom Project's Research and Insights Division Work Labs. And our team is honored to have several of our partners join in these discussions to provide insightful perspectives and practical applications. We hope you enjoy today our second installment and look forward to our ongoing collaboration.
Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Today, we're so thrilled to bring our partner, Bill Keene, the CEO and founder of Keene Studios, to the conversation. Bill, we're really privileged to have your experience and wisdom around flexibility benefiting everyone here today. In this second installment of our Blaze Your Own Path series, we're going to be sharing things about prioritizing flexibility that helps you attract and retain really dedicated, highly contributing talent. Like we shared in our last session, we really looked at kind of the effective approach to having flexibility work well inside your organization. And today we're going to talk about how that starts as early as your job description and then continues on in the experience of your culture. Bill, by way of introducing yourself, can you share a little bit about how you operate a flexible work operation today?
Well, I've been in business for over 50 years. So I started as just one person. And as I started adding staff years ago, I found that the people that I was looking for often were looking for more part-time work rather than full-time. This is not something that happened post-COVID. This has been going on even in the last century. Um, so by using people and a lot of the moms who had young children at home and giving them the flexibility, I was able to utilize a lot of part-time people and seasonal help along the way. And that's just continued that much stronger now that we're a whole lot larger.
So you've been a longtime proponent of it, and I love the mom plug. Thank you. I'm hoping that has been incredibly successful for you.
Yes, it is.
And we know that kind of designing and catering to the needs of talent is just a wonderfully beneficial way to attract them and also then to retain them. Can you talk a little bit about how you're doing that now and how that's played out since you've kind of grown and progressed from what started as seasonal to now a fuller operation?
Well, a large part of what we do is photographing high school seniors, which is a very seasonal operation. So the last half of the year, we are crazy busy. As a matter of fact, Monday is when we send out 9,000 notifications to all of the seniors we'll be photographing this year. And what from there on, it's just big hustle all the way. And by having people who are flexible and want to be flexible, we can create a situation where in the slower times of the year, we can have someone working 20 hours a week. And then if for those who can do 40 hours in person, they can then come in and work that heavy time. For those that we need who are extra people, we've been able to, as a matter of fact, right now, we have a few people who are from Project specifically, and we hire people on a seasonal basis so that we can use them. As a matter of fact, those who are from Mom Project right now are basically all working in the 20 to 30 hour range. Some of them from out of state, Some of them working physically in our studio happen to be right around the corner. So there are a lot of possibilities that we have been able to come up with because of that flexibility.
I love what you're speaking to there, which is it's not even a set procedure that you use. It's kind of, again, tailoring to the needs of that specific talent. You're really highly accommodating. And a lot of Work Labs research kind of starts there, right? It starts by centering on the experience and need of the talent we want to support. And I know that what we find when we do that is that we have really strong loyalty. We have really strong motivation to contribute back to that employer who, again, has kind of met them where they are. And then we also have really great productivity. Do you mind if I ask about your attrition rate? What percentage of employees do you retain, for example, over the past 3 to 4 years when so many had highly tumultuous turnover? How did Keen Studios do?
Well, we actually did extremely well. We doubled our business. Matter of fact, we found out we were doubling our business in February 2020. So talk about really good or really bad timing. We didn't know what was going to happen 6 months from then. So at that point, our attrition rate was really very good. At one point, when we were a bit smaller, I could point to an average work time for my staff of 12 years. So yeah, and at that point, there were 2 or 3 people who were working out of a staff of maybe 6, 2 or 3 who were working partly from home, some of them working part-time or just exactly what we're doing now. We've just expanded it more. During COVID, we lost none of our leadership team, and there are 4 in that group now, plus my wife and myself. And of that number, one of them is an avid golfer who spent a couple of weeks at a PGA tournament actually doing photography. And another 2 years ago, one of them went to Iceland for about 3 weeks during the off season. We have everybody traveling a lot during that off season, but then we never lost anyone during that period of time, and didn't lose any of our full-time or part-time people when we came back afterwards. So we had a very different experience than the average business did during that period of time.
Wow. I mean, it sounds like an exciting field. I didn't yet get to ask you, but can you share a little bit about Keen Studios, what all you do? So you do photography clearly, and I know you do,
Yeah,
yes, multidisciplinary. Go ahead and share.
right. Well, in the course of the past 25 years, we photographed over 60,000 high school seniors.
Wow.
And that is the biggest part of our business now. Another growing part is a high-end family business that just involves a smaller staff that actually, out of the 5 of us who are involved on that side, 2 of them are, no, 3 are Mom Project. So, one of them in Texas, another in Arizona. One who is not Mom Project is my longest term employee of 33 years, and I'm in San Diego. She lives in Philadelphia.
Wow.
So we always have to say, well, let's have that meeting at 3 p.m., 6 p.m. So we don't mess up our times.
Yeah, sure.
But the way that we have been able to establish the business has just allowed us to continue growing and even build that family side as we were running through more slower times with the bigger side of the business. So been good all the way around.
Yeah, that's congratulations on that. It sounds like you're adept at agility and adapting, which is also probably why you're comfortable accommodating different variable flex schedules. So
Absolutely.
I
And
congratulate you
work,
for being so
work
pioneer.
from home. This is my office. That's home.
Yeah, it's familiar to you, so you didn't feel like it was a high risk. Now,
Not at all.
here, we did some A/B testing and fielded a survey because it's been such a topic of, it has kind of become polarizing when we talk about flexibility in the context of
Absolutely.
remote or in person, instead of really looking at some of the things you're alluding to here, which is just about accommodating talent needs. So we did a survey and we did some, again, A/B testing around job descriptions that were all identical, with the exception of some language variations in the way that they talked about or referred to flexibility and or hybrid and or in person, and kind of looked at the variance there. We heard from 3,200 respondents. So very topical, very interested response rate. That's always a data marker for us too. When we get thousands of responses within 48 hours, we know it's something that the talent's invested in. And we uncovered a really unsurprising chasm between the appeal, the interest level, and the likelihood to apply to job listings that cited flexibility as kind of a priority of the company listing the role, and then those that either didn't or had in-person requirements and hybrid. So I want to show some slides. Yes. So we'll see here. The first is how well the respondent perceived the job as being a match. And we see the chasm as 83% when it was flexibility forward and 18% when it was in person. So again, a huge gap in the idea that the respondent felt that that job listing was a good match for them. And then when we look at the next slide, this again refers to now what happens in terms of my willingness to apply. And we see almost the same thing. 82% said that they are high likely to apply to the flexibility forward one, and only 20% for the in-person. And we see here kind of a staggering ranker for the different other types. So no flexibility cited at all, hybrid, and then flexibility by request. I know in a lot of cases what TA teams and recruiters and hiring managers will say is, well, we'll just note by request. But what we see here is the response or the perception of the respondents is that that still isn't a fit, and there's still a huge reduction in my likelihood to apply. So kind of an important thing to note, the responses and the sentiment of the talent that you're hoping to recruit. How do you help make it clear and ensure that everyone gets that Keen Studios is that kind of environment before they even start working there? Can you recommend anything to business leaders so that they can know good tips, tricks?
Well, when we started doing this, we would, for one thing, as a very, very small company, our major benefit was we could flex. One thing that can't be flexed in my business is it's really hard to do a Zoom call with someone who's going to be doing a portrait. It just doesn't work out well. But for all of the other positions, for example, many, many years ago, when we were still in the film-based world, we could send someone home with prints that were ready to be prepared for delivery. And at that point, that particular person had 2 young children at home. So she was able, and eventually 3, so she was able to do that for about 20 years, that she was completely flexed. She was in the studio part of the time, and part of the time she was at home. And the person I referred to as my longest term employee, she was able to do that position, or the various positions she has held at, I think by the time we got through, we've been in about 5 different cities, including San Diego a couple of times. But when we go out to look for someone like that, we simply say, one of your benefits and this is not new, this is 10 years ago, let alone 10 months ago, we'll say that for this particular position, this is a very flexible position. You can do some work from home. You can work within certain parameters. You can fit your own hours in. So, hope that helped.
Yeah, that's very helpful. That's a great example. And you've talked about having kind of senior level or people that have stayed with you that really know your business well. I mean, you're talking about someone who's been with you for a few decades and that your average duration is 12 years. That really lets you, maintain kind of a high caliber of trust in that employee really to know what to do and how to assist. And one thing that came up in the data that I'd like to look at now is when we talk about tenure, we see even greater gaps in willingness to take on a role that's not fully flexible or that doesn't have the kind of flexibility that suits lifestyle. And we'll see here those bars indicate tenure of experience. So when we're talking about more entry level, then we move to mid-level and senior level, the point of diminishing return is that really when we get to something like hybrid, where a lot of people perceive that and have a misconception that that's maybe at equal to the idea of flexibility, and really it's not. When we look at the idea of hybrid versus flexibility, full flexibility in the job listing for a tenured senior talent person, we're talking about only 37% were interested in the hybrid, whereas we see, close to 80 when we look at the flexibility. So I'm curious if in your experience, that senior level high trust employee takes advantage of the idea that you have high calibers of trust, what that working dynamic's like. Do you have a pretty good established rapport with those that have been with you for years and years?
Well, one of the better examples in my own staff is the person that handles all of our HR and finance. She lives, well, first, she started as a full-time in-person employee, uh, 12, 13 years ago, something like that. And she had a young child at home. Well, as that child grew a little bit older and the price of living in San Diego as such grew, um, she moved about an hour and 15 minutes away from our studio. But she knew so much and was so good at what she did, we offered her the role of handling the HR and finance. She came from a banking background, so it was perfect. Now she has the young man who was a baby at the time, way back when, is now entering high school. And she also has another 2-year-old at home. So she had a little too much flex time on her hands. But she handles all of the HR questions. We have so many platforms we're using: Slack, email, text, but we're in constant communication.
Yeah.
And she comes down every once in a while. Like, we have some major strategic meetings going on this week and next, and she's going to be here a couple of days.
Yeah.
But prior to that, I think she stopped by for some paperwork about 3 or 4 months ago, and otherwise she's been 100% flexible.
That's wonderful. I mean, it sounds like we talk about flexibility in terms of a lot of things. We talk about it from an organization support and that the leadership team is really invested in it and that whoever you're reporting to directly understands that and respects those needs. We talk about it in terms of time of day that work's occurring. We talk about it in terms of where work is occurring. So there's lots of ways to kind of construct something that suits your organization.
Right.
Can you give any practical, tactical advice to a fellow leader who maybe just wants to start and try and see if they could move more towards this? Is there anything you could say that would be a good first entry point to the idea of extending that level of kind of respect and trust for your team?
Well, probably the first thing is to look at what your workflow is. I mean, we cannot. Well, I shouldn't say that. I was just saying we can't hire photographers who are completely flexible, but actually we do have those who will help us on a seasonal basis and work with us for location photography. And then we don't see them for a few months. But there are certain positions that tend to lend themselves much more to a flexible schedule, let's say to not just working from home, but having things that they can, maybe they're going to be part-time in the office and need to have a little bit of communication with other people, or pick things up that they need to work with at home. But we identified things that we knew would allow us to attract people who 20 years ago were available, but not necessarily visible. Most everybody at that point was expecting to work in a location. So it's been good for many, many years.
I love that. Available but not visible. That's our experience often as well with this talent. A lot of times they're overlooked because of some kind of adjustment from what would be considered the conventional way that businesses worked. What I feel hopeful about is that it's drastically changed since you started pioneering this decades ago. And now it has become more normalized, but now we also see that it's partly an expectation. When we're talking about primary caregivers, moms fall into that role, and it's necessary to be able to functionally take care of their life and work integration, that they can do both aspects of that. And another thing that we look at that's, again, so hopeful and creates optimism is the outcomes. So our research team specifically specializes in predictive analytics. So we're able to kind of look at the link back to the business when we do meet moms and meet dads, advocates, allies, where they're at and where they need. What we see is it shows up in the business outcomes too. We see higher rates of productivity, 20% higher rates of productivity, 28% higher rates of retention, which you've certainly give examples of. And we see a willingness to refer their peers to their organizations. That primarily comes, again, from offering some sense of autonomy, by being able to empower employees to kind of live and work in the way that they need to exist in life in the way that they functionally have to. When you have dependents and you have caregiving requirements and responsibilities, you can't just shunt that. You have to be able to do it. So in closing, could you say, what's a guide that you'd say to moving towards more autonomous ways of all the team? Not having that oversight and check. You kind of said you're in constant communication and continually. Is that just from things like Slack, or how do you all manage to stay in sync, even though you have variations in time and day part and all of that?
Well, one very significant thing, I think, is the scheduling of regular Zoom meetings. We have a full staff meeting during the off season every 2 weeks. We have a leadership meeting once a week at an established time. That's it. When that leadership group meets, there have been times when we've had someone traveling in Europe who still attends that meeting, maybe briefly, or we've had people who are, let's say one of my head photographer will every once in a while log into that meeting from the road and not show his pretty face because he's driving to a meeting or driving to a session that's off-site. So, but that constant communication on a regularly established work week is very important. And it's also very important to have those means of communication, which are a more recent thing.
Yeah.
The Slack, Zoom, all of those things. And we use Trainual as a training manual. And right in there, we specify if you have something that is going to take more than a minute to write, or less than a minute to write, I should say, it goes in Slack. If it's more than a minute, then it goes into email.
Yeah.
If it's immediate, text.
Yeah.
And phone calls are very unusual, though. We're not the same time zones.
Yeah, well, that's true. To try to sync up who's where when. I think that that's an excellent tip. I think that's a wonderful takeaway, which is to say that you have some continuity in this point of tethered consistency as a team, where you know that you're all hands, all parties are going to get on and have an update and be able to kind of touch and feel where everyone's at. as a tether point for each week. I think that's a wonderful tip. Thank you, Bill. I also thank you for just your willingness to share kind of, again, this body of flexibility experience that you have brought to your team, your employees, and to Keen Studios for all these decades. Thank you for letting us all benefit from that insight. And I'll just say that what we see in the data, what we've talked about here, is that flexibility matters even before employees join your ecosystem, that the perception of you as an employer brand is really signified by the way that you prioritize flexibility. That's a direct connection in their mind to how much you respect their life outside of work also. And flexibility looks like supportive organizations like Bill's running at Keen Studios that really empower employees with greater autonomy. And the cost of entry for high performing mom talent that we see in those outcomes is to have it in place and to have it be respected. It's a significant business outcome when we kind of see and track what moms can bring if we can just unlock the potential with flexibility. Thank you, Bill, again for your time and for your insights. We just benefited so much from your knowledge, and we appreciate you.
Okay, my pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you all for coming.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining our second session. You'll receive an email with a summary of the research study we discussed today, as well as a recap of the entire series. We look forward to seeing you at our next one. Thanks, everyone.